Today is Wednesday, July 15th, and Joe Turner and myself, Judy Meyer, are talking to Bob and Judy Teson. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And how do you spell your last name?
Teson.
Isn't there something in this area named Teson? Where have I heard that name
Teson
before?
Road.
Teson Road. And is that in Hazelwood?
Yes, it's down in the bottoms.
I see. And so is the road named after your family?
Yes, his family.
I see.
They were original pioneers of
Really?
Florissant.
Of where?
Of Florissant.
Oh.
They were his great, back to the 1760s. They came here with the Aubuchons and the Marechals and, and they were all original pioneers of Florissant. And then about 1830, the city fathers wanted to give the sons of each original pioneer 40 acres.
Oh.
That's how they ended up down there. The Tesons got their 40 acres, I don't know how many Tesons, there's still quite a few down there on Teson Road. That's how Aubuchon Road got its name. Each son got 40 acres.
I see.
Yeah.
The Bob, you were born in St. Louis here in
I was born down in Bridgeton.
Bridgeton.
Yes, in my grandmother's farmhouse.
Oh, really? Where exactly was that?
It's right now. It was located where Earth City is, where the train building is.
Trane.
It's right there as you go through the Earth City. I don't know what the name of the road is, Earth City Expressway or whatever.
Pass over the railroad tracks and
Yeah, under
Yes.
where the big railroad trestle goes over Missouri Bottom Road and that runs along it. You can see it from Missouri Bottom Road and when you're in Earth City you can see it there. And my mom and dad were kind of, I guess you would say, poor, and they were living with my grandparents, the Kaisers.
And that really wasn't all that unusual, was it?
no.
No.
Were they farmers?
Yes, my grandfather was a farmer. He had about 80 acres, and when his father passed away, there was his dad was married before and had 3 daughters, and his first wife passed away, and then he remarried, and then he had 3 boys, and my grandfather was one of those. And when he passed away, I think there was like 3 farms that he owned, and my grandfather, he bought the other, I guess, benefactors or beneficiaries of the will. He bought them out to buy that particular farm. So I don't know exactly, I think it was somewhere around 1916, 1917, something like that.
Would you tell us what year you were born?
1941,
Okay.
February 1941.
And did you live there how long?
Approximately about a year,
Oh, okay.
and then my folks bought a house in Overland,
Okay.
and so then we lived there for about 6 years. Then we moved to Mary Ridge, which is next to St. Anne's. It's a small subdivision, for a year. Then my dad decided that he wanted to go to St. Petersburg because he was having some
Florida.
medical issues. So we sold the house there, sold all the furniture, and we lived with my grandma for about a month or two, Grandma and Grandpa, and then we headed for Florida with a 1950 Ford with a 14-foot Arkansas Traveler boat behind it and an outboard motor and his tools.
That was it.
And it was...
Did he know someone in Florida that you were going to stay with?
No, he just decided that he thought maybe the warmer weather or I don't know what made side on this, but
And how many children were there?
there was myself and my sister.
Okay.
So it was my mom, my dad's mom, which was my grandma, and my sister. So there was 5 of us.
So Grandma went with you.
Grandma went with us, yes. And it took us probably, I don't know, 2 or 3 days to get down there. And when we were down there, found a house to rent right away. Mr. Hooper was the fellow's name. And of course, he kind of had an eye for my grandma.
Oh, really?
Yeah, a lot of gentlemen kind of had an eye for her. She had won years and years ago. Before that, she had won a beauty contest in Bridgeton.
Really? In
They called
Bridgeton?
it the Belle of Bridgeton.
Wow.
And she won that
Oh my
contest.
God. And I suppose her husband had passed away, your
Yes.
dad's father?
Yes. Mhm.
Okay.
So the Mr. Hooper, he kind of had the eye for her, so we rented a place there, and we stayed there about a month.
Just, how old were you during this time?
I was going from the 7th to the 8th grade.
Okay, so you're in kind of middle school type.
Right.
Okay.
And it was 1950, I think it's 1952, 53, somewhere around there.
Okay.
So my mom was very frugal, so they sold the house and sold everything, all the furniture and everything, and so she put it away. We lived down there for a month, and I think they both got homesick because my grandma and Grandpa Kaiser, they were back here, and my dad had 5 brothers, and of course Grandma, those 6 sons, so they both got homesick and that, and so then we came back after a month.
Oh.
So
Did he feel like his health improved being down there?
no,
Oh.
no.
So when you came back here, where did you go to?
We went to live with Grandma and Grandpa until Mom found a house. My dad was having problems with kidney stones at the time, so I can remember she basically went and looked for different houses and that, and they found one in St. Anne's, and that was back in the same school district where I had gone to school before.
Uh-huh.
So, and back in the Rittner School District. So we moved to St. Anne's then. But we lived there for a year, and my dad decided that he wanted to go out and live by the Mississippi River. So this house went up for sale. He bought an old house on Woodson Road and St. Charles Rock Road and tore it down for the lumber.
That's interesting.
So him and my uncle, Ambrose, they proceeded to build a house out off of Dwyer Road out in St. Charles County, next to the river. And worked on it pretty much all summer. And it wasn't quite completed when school started, and I didn't want to go out there. I was used to getting to go to the show on Friday nights and that, and all my friends lived in Overland and that. I didn't want to go out there, and then after living out there for 6 or 7 months, and Dad had a boat, put a little motor on it, and I could tootle around in the river there with it, go fishing. It was really nice.
So did you finish your education where?
At St. Charles High School.
I
St.
see.
Charles.
I see.
4 years.
I see.
Yeah.
And when did you meet Judy?
I guess when little babies. Our dads were good friends.
Really? How did they know each other?
They went to the same grade school, right here around the corner.
What was the name of the grade
Garrett
school?
School.
They went to Garrett School.
Uh-huh.
Gosh,
And,
what years do you think those were?
I'm going to say around 1920 when they first started going to school there. And then they just became buddies, and they remained buddies all their lives. I mean, they were really close all their lives.
These are your two fathers.
Yeah.
And Judy, where did you start off then? Life.
Oh, here. I've been here. My great-grandfather, that subdivision next to this one,
What's it called?
Cedar Brook.
Okay.
That's where it started. My great-grandfather, Christian Schrader, started when he came from Germany. He ended up at first in Florissant as a tenant farmer. I don't know exactly how long he was there. But anyway, the house that he eventually bought was built by Pierre Choteau.
Pierre Choteau.
Pierre Choteau. It was built in 1797, and it was right across the fields from his brother August Choteau. They both had country homes out here, and they used to raise crops and then take what they raised back into the city and sell the stuff with horses or mules or wagons. And then it was sold. He died, and I got the paperwork on that, by the way. And then he sold it to another French family. I guess he passed away, and it went to a French family by the name of Creeley, Jean-Baptiste Creeley. And they were there for a long time. Then around 1870 or so, they sold it to my great-grandfather, Christian Schrader, and they farmed it. Then when he passed away, it went to my grandfather, and he continued farming, and they were fruit growers, mainly peaches. So they raised a lot of peach, they had big peach crops.
Could you define this area for us, for those that don't exactly know the area you're speaking of? Is it Bridgeton?
Next door
Okay.
to Bridgeton.
Next door to Bridgeton. So it
The
would be-
railroad tracks separate us.
So it would be considered Hazelwood then?
Yes, that now it is. Then it was. Sometimes my grandparents would get mail, and it would be Bridgeton, Missouri, Bonfils, Missouri, St. Louis County, Missouri.
Where was Bonfils then?
That was down in the where Bill Pruitt's house is.
On Tawson.
On Leonard Pruitt, yeah. It was across the road at an angle across the road. And but anyway, then my grandfather purchased it in the 1870s from the Creeleys. They raised crops and big peach crops. And anyway, then when he died, my dad got this half of the portion. His brother got that half of the portion where the house and the barn and everything stood. So I've not really gone anywhere. This is pretty much it.
What school did you go to?
I started out at Garrett, little one-room schoolhouse.
Really?
Yes, and got a picture of it over there. And my grandmother, the one who went to Bonfils, she taught there. And then around 1911 or so, she quit teaching. She got married, and she married my grandfather. And we still have some of her work that she did at the school, at Bonfils School, some of her drawings and work.
Wow. Was Bonfils more than a one-room schoolhouse?
No, it was a one-room schoolhouse, but it eventually turned into a two-room schoolhouse. It was expanded into a two-room schoolhouse.
Let me ask you, at the Payne Gentry House, I'm a guide, and we talk about the one-room schoolhouse on Fifi Road. And I always say to my younger visitors that I don't know how teachers could manage in a one-room schoolhouse when you have all different levels of children.
They did, and they were strict, and they were young. My grandmother, she only went to the 8th grade, but she wanted to become a teacher, so she went on to Lindenwood College in St. Charles, and she got her teaching degree. And so she was only like still a teenager when she started teaching, and that was common back then. But they had to quit if they got married. Back then, teachers they got married, they had to quit teaching.
Why do you think that was?
I don't think they wanted pregnant teachers around the students, if that should be the case. But she had to quit teaching after she got married. And I've still got her books
Wow.
that she taught with over there.
And this was your grandmother.
This was my grandmother.
And what about your mother? What was she a teacher?
No, she came from Orchard Farm, Missouri,
Which is where?
way out in St. Charles
Oh,
County.
sure. Now sure. Out
Yeah.
94.
Yes.
Yes.
And your father was?
Ernest Schrader. His dad was Ernst without the E. And then his father was Christian Schrader. But anyway, when my great-grandfather Christian bought the homestead, there was no Garrett School there. So he donated 1 acre of ground. See, he also owned property across Missouri Bottom Road. That's where they built the school. He donated 1 acre of ground for the school. And there was a family by the name of Garrett that lived further up Missouri Bottom Road, and they financed it.
Oh.
So between the two, that's how the school got built.
I see. What about Bonfil School? Do you know the origin of that one?
It was, I don't know when it was built. I only know who it was named after. I'm not sure when it was built, but I'm going to assume about the same time. Yeah. But it did start out as a one-room schoolhouse as well. And there's a book written, St. Louis County had 13 one-room schools in the county. And then they consolidated. They wanted to build new schools, public schools, big schools, and a high school. So in 1951, they closed down all the one-room schoolhouses, and they started building larger schools for a bigger more people were moving in. The one-room schools weren't holding all the students anymore.
I don't think so.
So they were building bigger schools, and they closed down all the one-room schoolhouses. Garrett School is still there. A lot of those schools are still standing, but they've been converted into houses, and they're often not recognizable as a school.
Yeah.
But there's only been, as far as I know, maybe 2 of them been taken down. So there's a good many of them still standing.
And where did you go to school?
I went first to Garrett, and then I went to Rosary School. That's on Hottershell. And
That parochial school?
yes, that was a very, very old school as well. That was built even before Garrett. That was built in 1856. That one goes back even further. And I went to the church we were going to also had a schoolroom. And so Mom thought we should go to to that school.
What was the name of that?
It was a Lutheran school. No. Peace Lutheran. And it was on close to Edmondson Road. What was that road you take to get? Is that Edmondson? Yeah, okay. Then from there, then we went to high school at the Hazelwood High School, which was built in 1957.
When did you two get married?
New Year's Eve.
New Year's Eve, 1960.
Yeah.
1960. And let me ask you, what were you working then, Bob?
Yes.
What kind of work did you do?
I was TV repair,
Oh, a TV repair.
working for my uncle. He had a shop in Woodson Terrace.
Okay.
Teson TV was the name.
Oh, and Judy, were you working?
No. We were having kids.
So when you first got married, where did you live?
We lived out by his mom and dad at the where they lived at the time, out at the river where he was talking about when they wanted to go out to the river. We lived out there with them for a while. Then a house trailer came empty up the road a little ways, and we moved into that. And we stayed there until my dad sold his half of the land. That was already, my uncle, his brother, had already sold his half, and it had 1,600 peach trees on it.
Wow.
He passed away. We kept the orchard going for another 7 years. Then my aunt sold it. That's where the Cedarbrook subdivision came. My dad hung on to his for a while. Then in 1967 he sold it. And that's how, but he wouldn't sell his house up there.
Where was the house?
Right behind us on Missouri Bottom Road. Right directly behind us. And there's a story on that house. That is unbelievable. But then when they were building this subdivision, he asked us if we would like to come and live in one of these houses. We said sure. So that's how we were here. But that house was built, it's a big house, as you can see up there. 3 bedrooms, living room, dining room, kitchen, bathroom, which the bathroom wasn't operable until 7 years after we had already moved in. There's a nice toilet out there though, and it's still there. But my dad and my mom's brother cut down a huge cottonwood tree. Massive, massive cottonwood tree. He had a crosscut saw, which was only 6 feet long, and it was too short. So they cut big, deep indentions on both sides of the tree. And then they had to take the axe and cut, to make the tree fall in the direction they wanted it to fall. They had to
Be careful,
cut out the direction, and so they cut out a big area with an axe. And then they sawed, and they sawed, and they sawed. And the evening before, he sharpened, and he, what do you call it when they sharpen the blades and they make sure they're all in?
Set so it clears the chips out.
Yeah.
You put it certain, just a little angle on each. One's an angle this way, and the next one will be that way. And
on the saw.
it clears it.
So it had to be really sharp. They started at daybreak. And we were down there when they started. Us kids just had to wait, had to look. And anyway, my dad wouldn't stop. It got to be lunch. And my uncle said, well, Ernsie, can we stop for lunch?
Yeah.
I said, okay. So they stopped for lunch. And no more than had they got it down when he was up again. And they sawed, and they sawed, and they sawed. Finally, at dusk, that tree came down.
Wow.
We were there when it came down.
Wow.
Massive. It was as big as a sequoia.
My
or a red.
gosh.
Yeah, it was. We got pictures of it. Massive. If you stand up, it was still taller than you. So then he got the mules. We farmed with mules here. And hitched up the mules, got the chains, chained everything to the tree, to the first, first we had to then saw it in sections, 8 to 9 foot sections. So the first section, my uncle had a big grain truck, took the sides off of it, backed it down. Now this is on a 40-degree hill. Backed it down. And hitched up the mules, chains to that section, and then it was so heavy that the mules almost couldn't do it. So you know when something's so heavy, you take a step, but your step goes back down. So my uncle got on one side, and my dad got on the other side, and they, I don't know, little pokers or sticks or something, and they would, when the mules would lift their foot, they would keep hitting the back, so they would keep that foot going forward. They finally got it up the ramp into the truck.
Mm-hmm. Oh.
So now we gotta go up the hill. My uncle got halfway up with his grain truck, and the truck came up off the front. The wheels came from,
Oh my.
came up.
Wow.
So then my dad went and got the mules. And at that point, I ran away. Because I thought they were gonna break their legs, and then my dad would have to shoot them.
Oh.
That scared me. It really did. I ran. I didn't. So he hitched the mules to the front of the truck, and so between the mules and the truck's engine,
Uh-huh.
they could get them up.
Wow.
That's how big. That was one big. So he built that whole house, that 2-car garage, and that little toilet out back. One single tree.
Wow. Oh my.
Yeah, yeah. And that's why he said they'll never get my house. They will not get my house. They can build around me, but they won't get my house.
So the house is still there.
It's right there.
And who's living there?
My grandson is in there now.
Oh, really?
Mhm.
Well, let me ask you, speaking of starting your family, how many children did you have?
With 3.
3?
Mm-hmm.
And are they in this area? Or?
No, one lives over by the Wentzville plant in St. Charles. That's our daughter. Our oldest son lives in Valley Park. He's a school teacher. And then we lost our youngest son at the age of 30
Oh my.
due to a lightning strike.
Wow. Where did that happen?
He was camping on the Missouri River, and he was with his fiancee, and it got to be late, around 11 o'clock or so. Terrible storm came up, and we had their little boy. Well, he was in the process of a divorce, so we had his little boy with us,
Mm-hmm.
and lightning came through the tent, and it struck him.
Wow.
Now, when you're in a tent, if you've got the metal poles, the lightning will follow the metal poles.
Mm-hmm.
But most tents don't have metal poles anymore. So you become the target.
Mm.
Not if there's a pole there, not that you wouldn't get hurt. You might get hurt badly, but it may not kill you. But it may cripple you. But you become the direct target then. Without the metal there, you are the target. And it came right straight through the tent.
Wow.
And killed him instantly. And then his fiancee, who did not know how to drive a boat,
Oh.
except for that afternoon, he taught her.
Wow.
So she got in the boat. She had to tear herself out of the tent because the zipper and everything was melted. Everything was melted.
Wow.
So she couldn't hear out of her ears. She was blind in one eye. Could only use one arm because the lightning came out of him and went through her. But she got in the boat and she made it 2.5 miles upriver. She got to the ramp, and then she got to outside phone. She got in his car, and with the trailer still back on it, on the back of it, and she just drove out and got to an outside phone, public phone, and then she called for help.
Wow. That
It's
is
quite a story.
It is, and I'm very sorry you
Thank you.
had that story to even tell, and
Yeah,
very sorry about that. Wow.
we've learned a lot about lightning since then.
Wow.
It's something most people don't respect
No.
enough.
No, absolutely. Absolutely not.
He wasn't afraid of it, and that's one of the, probably what killed him was that he had no fear of it.
Well, it sounded like a very freaky thing, too, though.
Yeah.
Just
But a lot of people, lightning hits more people than people think.
Right. Well, thank you for sharing that. Sorry, like I said, you had that family experience. So how long have you lived in this present house?
Since 1967, right when they started building the houses.
Mm-hmm. So you've seen a lot of change in the area?
Yeah,
Mhm.
we have.
And Bridgeton as well as Hazelwood?
Yes, because he's had family that lived in Bridgeton. I mean, it's been a back and forth thing for us.
At one time we were considered St. Louis County, and then Hazelwood was on one side of us, and Bridgeton was on the other side of us. And they were battling over who was gonna
Right.
get us. So for a while, at one period, we were considered Bridgeton. And then they said something was not right with the election or whatever, the selection.
Mm-hmm.
So then we went back to St. Louis County, and then later on, we wound up in Hazelwood, so.
But Bridgeton also wanted this as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
So, but it's just, it's just, the line is right there. It's just so close, and it's,
Now, coming over here, I noticed how close you were to the Bridgeton Municipal Athletic
Mhm.
Field
Right.
and,
right.
what was once a lot of farmland, wasn't it? Well, it's still some farmland down there, isn't it?
Yeah.
Is there some? Yeah, well, down at the bottoms, yeah, in the bottoms,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's what we call the bottoms.
That's what we call the bottoms, yes. And there was a time when that was the Missouri Bottom Road, you know how it goes out and then it goes, we go down into the bottoms, and then Missouri Bottom Road goes to the left, and Aubuchon Road goes to the right. Well, Missouri Bottom Road was always the dividing line between the French and the German.
Oh, really?
Oh yes, the Germans did not like the French. They thought that the Germans were very particular in farming. They're like no weeds in the fields. No, very, very, very particular. The French, if they're farming and somebody yelled party, they'd leave the plow, take the mule or the horse back to the barn and party. Nothing would get done. And so the Germans did not respect that at all.
I see.
They thought that was a slovenly way to live.
Yes.
No farmer would act like that.
Right.
They didn't like it. So they didn't cross paths.
I see.
And so on one occasion, down there on Teson Road, they were having a big party. And they invited, some of the Germans to come on. Not one German showed up. That was just the dividing line. Well, his dad was part of that French on that side of the Missouri Bottom Road.
Bob's father.
Bob's father. He was part of all them French down there. His mom's family was the Germans.
Uh-oh.
Okay. Well, they started going together. And his grandpa, his mom's dad, was not in favor of that at all. Stay away from them French.
Yeah.
Don't go around them French.
Don't go there.
Well, he found out, his dad wanted to make an impression. So he would help a lot on the farm.
On her farm? Her family's farm?
On his family's,
Yeah.
his mom's, his grandpa, his mom's dad, on that farm down there. He would come and he'd help, and anything that got broke, he'd fix it, and because he was good at that sort of thing. And he would fix a lot of things, and one day he came down there drunk, didn't he?
Uh-oh.
The
That's
French
not
love.
the way to go.
The French love their drinks.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so he went down there to the Kaiser farmhouse, and he's drunk.
Uh-oh.
And he landed on the porch?
Got his head, there was a hole in the screen or something, got his head stuck through there, and that's where he spent the night.
And his mom wouldn't help him. Wouldn't help him. So, but anyway, the romance continued. The romance continued, and then when the 51 flood came, of course, they married prior to that, but when the 51 flood came, then his dad's knowledge of how to do things really came about. Because the barn down there, you know, it went down in the flood with all the machinery in it.
We've heard a few people talking, telling us about the bottom land, and how often did that land flood down there? Not every year.
No. In fact, the Kaiser family had been there since the 1860s. They came from Mecklenburg, Germany. Late 50s, early 1860s. It had never flooded up that high, ever. Then in 51, for the first time.
1951.
1951, yeah. It flooded. And it was a severe flood, very severe. And it brought the barn down. And usually when you get a flood like that, it swirls around the buildings and it swirls all the dirt out from underneath it, and then they fall right into the hole. And that's exactly what happened to the barn. So his dad then I'll let you tell them how he got all the machinery out.
Okay, well, where he worked, he was in maintenance and he was a millwright. And he worked at Lincoln, they call it Lincoln St. Louis now, but it was Lincoln Engineering, down on Goodfellow and Hatcher Bridge.
Okay.
He started there actually in about 1941 when I was born. And they did a lot of the, for World War II, they made the bullets and that with the screw machines and that.
What they call the small arms plant.
Yeah, well, it was next to the small arms, yeah. But anyway, I'm going to go back just a little bit. On my grandpa's farm, there was a small airport along the rock road there called Kratz Field.
Oh, we've heard a little bit about
yeah.
Kratzfield with a K.
And they had small Piper Cubs and planes like that, and then they trained pilots there also. And the gentleman that owned Kratzfield, he came to my grandpa Kaiser and he said, I'll build a levee around your farm if you'll let me take the dirt, your dirt. He said, I will the machinery and everything, and we'll build a levee around your farm, and it'll protect it, during high water. And so my grandpa said, okay, can do that. So then they built a levee. I'm not sure, late 30s, early 40s, I think, is when it was built. So then in 1951, when the flood came, St. Charles Rock Road, the water broke St. Charles Rock Road, right there where Kratz Field was at. And then when it flooded that, well, then the levee was around all that, so it was holding the water. It was holding the water there, wasn't letting it release. So then they went in a couple places on the levee and they dynamited it so it could release the water and get it away from the rock road and Kratz Field and that. So. And
will you define where Kratzfield was? Because we've heard talk about this, but I have forgotten.
Okay.
What sits there right now?
It's pretty much right directly across from where the Westlake dump is.
Oh.
Whatever they want to call it. So and there's still some of the buildings there. You can still tell that they were like hangars and that for the small airplanes and that. And then there's still a body of water on the right side going west on St. Charles Rock Road.
Where it broke through.
That's right, where it broke
That's
through.
still from that flood.
Very interesting.
Yeah, and there,
How much time do we have?
Excuse me.
We still got film.
It sounds like it. Yeah, we've heard of people talking about that. And I'm so glad that you mentioned it. What did you think? I like to ask people this, and especially you being so involved and connected with this area. What did you think when they started talking about building this Earth City area up? What did you think of that? Because that was just what, no man's land for a while?
Yes, it was. Yes, it was. There wasn't a house out there. Wasn't a house out there. Just, there was the farmhouse, And then there was the Hahns. There was a farmhouse out there, Wilford Hahn, you know, and his siblings were there.
And the Wormings.
And the Wormings. But if you looked across the road, nothing. Nothing.
My grandpa would call it, I thought he would call it Steed's Island or something like that. And then there was a little, going down the rock road toward the old bridge, there was a fruit stand there.
Mhm.
There was two weight scales where they would weigh the trucks, because that was one of the main routes going west before they went across the old bridge.
That old bridge,
Mhm.
that
115.
narrow little
Yes,
bridge
yes.
that scares
Right.
the heck out of me.
And they called it Sandtown.
Sandtown.
Yeah, and then there was two bars, two taverns, I guess. One was Red and Jenny's, and one was, it was a city service station, filling station, and then there was another filling station. And that was the main
Mhm.
route going west. And I can remember many times we used to go, my dad always had a boat, and we'd go on the Mississippi River, and we had to go across the bridge to get to the Mississippi River. And on like Friday nights or Saturdays, the traffic would just be backed up for miles, because they had to go across the old bridge, then they had to make a left on 2nd Street and go to First Capitol, where the St. Joe's Hospital sits on the corner there. They had to go up that big hill,
Mm-hmm.
and they have to shift their gears, and it's all night long in that, and so it was quite a hassle. And speaking of my dad's boat, he always had a boat, so in 1951, when the river flooded down there, it had been, the farmland around there had been underwater for probably a week or so, and my grandma and grandpa, they finally moved out of their farm. My grandpa said, well, I'm not moving out of this house. It hasn't been over this in 100 years. I'm not moving. Well, then finally the Coast Guard had to come in and get them and move them
Wow.
out. But they had about 300 chickens in the
Oh
chicken
my
house.
gosh.
And so that had been about a week since, so my dad and my Uncle Arnold put my dad's boat in off of Tausic Road there. Tausic used to make like a horseshoe shape. Went down and around and come back, and then one goes under the railroad tracks down there.
Mhm.
So there was a lady that had a house down there, and they asked permission if they could put, and they put the boat in there, and then they went to, drove down to my grandfather's farm, and when they got down there, they got to where the chicken house was, and they opened the door to see how many chickens were left, and they said there was about 50 of them left. So they just left the door open so they could come and go as they wanted to, because the water started to recede a little bit then. So, but
And then
yeah.
the grappling hook, and had to get all that.
And then, after it's all said and done, my grandpa lost his big barn. It fell into this hole around where the water was going around, swirling around for the levee there. So my dad made a big grappling hook, and then he got some cable. I don't know if Lincoln kind of helped him with getting that, or
Mm-hmm.
and so he made this, and then my grandpa Kaiser had a tractor, and so they would first they started throwing it in the water because there was water all around the barn, and then they'd hook something and they'd pull it out with the tractor, and then there was some of the equipment that was inside the barn, so then they got on the roof of the barn and cut it in sections, and they would put their grappling hook on it and pull it out and pull it up on the ground there, and then they worked at whatever else was left in there, and they got all the machinery that was left in there. But before the flood hit, my grandpa, he had moved his two tractors that he had moved it up on Tausic up there. My Uncle Arnold, which was my grandpa's son, he had a son and a daughter, my mom and my uncle. And my uncle had married a Shalley, Dorothy Shalley, and her dad had a farm right up on Tausic up there. So that's where my grandpa took his equipment and left it up there. normally, and when the bottoms would flood, it would never get my grandfather's farm, because it was one of the higher farms in there, so a lot of the people that lived in the bottoms, they would bring their equipment up and park it on my grandfather's,
Uh-huh.
on the high ground had my grandfather's there, and that my grandpa would get maybe some seep water in some of the fields, but that was it. But yeah, my dad, my uncle, and my two uncles, my Uncle Arnold and my Uncle Ambrose, and it was amazing being able to pull all that stuff out of there with that grappling hook.
Yes, yes.
So then after the flood was over and the water receded, then the guy from Kratz Field came back down again to see my grandpa, and he said, I'll fill in all the holes, and we'll rebuild the levee if I can use your dirt again. And so Grandpa said, okay, because they had a big hole behind their house and all around the barn, and then there was some big holes where they had dynamited the levee in a couple places and so everything kind of got back to normal then. So, but yeah.
A lot of people don't really know much about the 51 flood.
And somewhere there's a picture of St. Charles Rock Road. The Hans had two smaller frame houses along St. Charles Rock Road. They used to have like a vegetable stand there. They would sell vegetables out of them.
It was before you got to the 115 bridge.
And it's kind of almost right where the intersection is on St. Charles Rock Road, and the Earth City Expressway goes through there. There was the two houses were on the right side. We have pictures of the water running through the windows on the one and through the other one. So most people don't realize that was underwater.
Right.
They don't realize how severe that
Yeah.
flood
What do you
was.
think about the rain, all the rain we just had here in June of 2015? Do you think that was comparable
To
what you were talking about in this
well, it would depend on
1951?
which.
Well, it was in '51 when this flood was. It was in August, and it wasn't what we had around here. It was what they had west of us and north of us, mostly west of us, that caused the flooding here.
It's not what we get here. It's what happens above from here.
But they had rain also above here. But I mean, this June was very rainy for us.
Yes.
Here. But speaking again of the Payne Gentry house in Bridgeton, again, that was why that Payne and Gentry, the Payne family and the Post family came up to Bridgeton was to escape the flooding in the
Right.
Chesterfield Valley.
Okay.
And so Elizabeth Gentry Syed, the direct heir to the Payne Gentry family, she felt it was not a good idea for them to be building all that in the Chesterfield Valley because of the flooding.
They're right. It shouldn't, you should let nature have its
Its way, its due
leave
course.
nature alone.
So that's why I was asking you, what did you think when this whole issue of the Earth City area, what did you think then when they were proposing all this building, Earth City?
I thought, well, if the levee breaks, bye-bye.
There's a lot of businesses.
Yes, and they
down
will,
there.
and it will happen. It will happen. And it will get flooded.
They built the levee a lot higher than what the original levee that my grandfather had around his place. It's down by Missouri Bottom Road, the old Missouri Bottom Road now, and it's a lot higher than the one that he had in '51. But yeah.
But see, you gotta think. The water, they call it seep water. It goes underneath, and it rises from underneath. It don't have to come over the top to destroy a levee.
I see. Well, thank you for clearing that up, and thank you for letting us come today. And
You're welcome.
it was very interesting talking to you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you.